Okay, I think, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Roxane Byrne, and I'm the interim coordinator of Equity, Diversity, and Cultural Competency at Santa Barbara City College. I want to welcome everyone here today for part 2 of the America We Know, a series that we hope is going to continue on throughout the academic year and, for many years to come. Today's topic is Black liberation, media representation, and the digitization of white supremacy. So we've got a lot of great things to talk about today with our panel. We're joined again today by our wonderful, fabulous moderator and SBCC Professor of Communications, Dr. Donte Newman. And those of you who were with us last time know that this is going to be a fun and exciting and dynamic presentation, and have your fingers on the keyboard because Donte is going to be asking you to do all kinds of things in the chat.
Absolutely.
We are really honored and excited to introduce some of our panelists today. We have Dr. Diya Basu, a professor of digital media from Hunter College. We have Kedarious Colbert, a city planner for the city of Costa Mesa. City planning commissioner, sorry, and Vincent Powell, filmmaker and media scholar. So I wanted to let you know before we get started real quick that we have been recording and will be recording today all of our previous America We Know series and the workshop that we did on Monday as well. We are getting those closed captions, so they are in process and getting ready, but those will be released too. So if you watch today and you want to share this later, just be on the lookout. I will be sending out a recording as soon as we have it closed captioned. And as Raisa told us, we will be using the chat. I will be moderating and watching the questions that come in and different comments that come in, and we'll be addressing those questions and comments towards the end of the talk today. So I'm gonna pass this over to Dr. Newman and let me know what I can do to help you, Donte.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we begin, I must say thank you to Roxane and thank you to Rachel and Raisa. Thank you to the Center for Equity and Social Justice, and thank you to the SBCC Foundation for graciously presenting the America We Know, Black liberation, media representation, and the digitization of white supremacy. Now, let's be real today, y'all. Let's keep it real today. So we're going to have some courageous conversations. We're going to talk about things that we generally don't talk about in the presence of a diverse group. And so we know that SBCC is about 40% white. We know that SBCC is about 38% Latinx, about 2 or 3% Black. But we've got a panel that is represented by 3 Black men and a brown Indian woman. Okay, if you want a diverse panel, then we've got to get diverse people at SBCC. Right? That's just the honest truth. If we want a diverse panel, we got to get more diverse people at SBCC, and we're gonna work on funding for the America We Know series. But that's the honest truth. And so listen, for everyone who's listening today, we want you to be interactive. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do, because it's not controversial, right? Type Black Lives Matter in the chat. Do not type BLM. Write it out. Right? Just type Black Lives Matter in the chat. That's how we're going to start today, Black Lives Matter. Listen, you could type All Lives Matter if you want to, but that's not what we're talking about today. We're not talking about Blue Lives Matter. We're not talking about All Lives Matter. And we're not talking about White Lives Matter. In fact, we're not even talking about Young Lives Matter or Rich Lives Matter, okay? We're not talking about that either, okay? So listen, we've got some dynamic, incredibly intelligent panelists today. Vincent Powell, who is a good friend of mine. He was my debate partner for 4 years at Texas Southern University. And we also are joined by Kedarious Colbert, who is also a good friend of mine. He also was a debate team member, as well as my mentor, if you will, while I was at Texas Southern University, and also a groomsman in my wedding. And Dr. Diya Basu, who was a member in my doctoral cohort at American University. And she's also my knowledge partner. Okay, is that right, Diya?
You're so kind, you're so kind.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we are knowledge partners. And so again, thank you all so much for agreeing to participate as panelists on the America We Know panel. And so let's just jump right into it, because we know what is going on in America. We know what's going on in America. And so I want to ask each of you, Diya, Vincent, and Kedarious, right? How would you characterize the America that you know? Again, what is the America that you know? How would you characterize the America that you know? And how does your characterization of America differ from some white Americans? Let's go to Vincent Powell.
You called my name second, so I thought that I'd be second. Before I start, I want to share that I knew Dr. Newman before he even thought he could attain a PhD. And so it's a pleasure to hear his colleagues and his equals call him Dr. Newman. It has a nice ring to it, Donte. I like it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm born and raised in Houston, Texas. I lived in LA for a bit while I got my master's at USC. And as a Black man that grew up in the South, I've been saying to people, as we've talked about just what we're facing right now as a country, that for the first time, I feel like I live in the United States of America. I think that for so long, we had this idea of what society looked like. And of course, after the election of President Barack Obama, we thought, or some thought, that we were post-racial. All the while, as a Black man, I knew we were nowhere near that. And I knew that the words of Dr. Martin Luther King and so many other luminaries of past, their words hadn't come to pass either. And so for the first time, I feel like we're all talking about race the right way. And though everyone's not on the right side of the conversation, at least we're all talking about it. There was a time where we were talking about police brutality, but we weren't talking about Black people being killed by cops. We were saying that Eric Garner or Mike Brown could have done something in order for them to not die. We were looking at cases like Sandra Bland and saying, oh, maybe she did something to deserve her death. And even the case of someone like Trayvon Martin, we excused George Zimmerman as a country, and we allowed him to still tour and sign bags of Skittles and hand out hoodies and even sell the gun that he killed Trayvon Martin with. And so for the first time, I feel that our country as a whole is erupting with a disease. And it's not COVID. It's a disease that we can see. It's a disease that does have symptoms. And it's a disease that we've been trying to eradicate for centuries. And so for the first time, I feel like the world or the country all sees my plight. Now, whether they turn a deaf ear to it or not, that's on them. Whether they stand outside their homes, like the couple in, was it North Carolina that had their guns out as the South Carolina while the Black Lives Matter protest was walking past their front yard. No matter what side you're on, I really love the fact that we're talking about race. I've never felt more seen. I've never felt more alive. I've never felt more heard. I've never felt more understood than I do now.
Right.
And I've also never felt more scared. I've also never felt, my breaker box on my home is outside my house in my front yard. And the other night it was 10:30 and I needed to go flip the breaker. And my wife had to say to me, wait until the morning because you don't want someone to see a Black man walking in the front yard at 10:30 at night. You don't know what will happen. And we had this really sobering moment outside of the house that I pay to live in.
Right.
I couldn't go flip my breaker. Just to get electricity. So that's my America right now. That's my truth. That's my reality. And we'll get into more later.
Right. And I love that. And you said, that's my America. That sounds like a podcast, right?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
We'll collaborate on it. You know, that's the
it.
America that you know. And I think that you said something that is incredibly important. You said that I feel heard. You know, I'm reading D. Ray's book right now. He says that we have never been the voiceless. We have been we have been unheard, right? Absolutely. And so that's incredibly important that you talk about being heard right now in this moment. And we'll talk about what does it mean to be heard, because I've always heard you. So who wasn't listening?
Absolutely.
And I think, right. Because I've heard.
And anything I just said was not anything that you didn't know in your own individual walk.
Right.
The question is, who hasn't been listening?
Who hasn't been listening? And that's something that we're definitely going to talk about. Who's talking and who's listening, or who's talking and who isn't listening. And right. And so I want to go to Dr. Diya Basu, one of my knowledge partner, right? And Diya is a close friend of mine, and Diya identifies as a brown Indian woman. And Diya has been in America off and on for maybe the past 30 years or so, give or take, something like that. And so there's so much that I can say about Diya and how Diya and I were doctoral students in a predominantly white institution. Here we are, people of color, fighting against color blindness, fighting against aversive racism. So it was Diya and I. So Diya, and maybe this is from your perspective as a brown Indian woman, right? So how would you characterize the America that you know, and how does that characterization, right, that characterization differ from other white Americans?
So I'm a brown Indian woman. I am an international. I speak from an outside perspective. I don't claim to know what Black Americans feel as a people and as Americans. So my remarks, my observations are very much from the outside while living within this country. So I first came to the United States in the mid-80s, so I've already aged myself, but I actually, you know, when I came back again, and I lived for several years here as a young undergraduate student, and then went back home to India and came back after 25 years in 2015. And I was so disappointed and I was so sad when I returned back in 2015, and I really felt that very little had changed. As far as relations between Black Americans and white Americans, very little had changed, and I was disappointed. And I was tired when I used to attend little working groups at the American University in trying to talk about diversity and racial equity. I was hearing the same conversations that I had heard in '84. And I was like, what happened? It was like a time warp.
Right.
And I said, nothing has changed. And here I was in 2008, sitting in front of my television screen in India, and I could not believe that America had elected a Black man as their president. So when I came back in 2015, I came back with very high hopes about I was going to see a changed America. And I didn't see it.
Right.
That was the America that I came back to after 25 years.
Right.
This year is the first time that I feel a sense of a rebirth almost, of people willing to engage in a certain level of truth-taking and truth-making and acceptance of certain issues that for so long I felt as an outsider just got brushed. You know, there would be these little little kind of occasions of closed circle conversations, but the systems, the structures remained unchanged.
Right.
And so that was the America that I came back to after over 2 decades, and I was thoroughly disappointed. Today, I feel there is a hope. As an Indian, I find that there is a reawakening in my community in terms of where Indian Americans stand on this issue. For too long, we've been portrayed as the model minority, the minority immigrant population that has done the best, that has achieved the most in terms of socioeconomic status. But we kept very clear of any kind of race discussions because we felt we didn't want to have to choose. And we felt it safer to not say anything, to just be quiet. And I'm so encouraged by younger generation Indian Americans who are coming out and who are saying, no, this is where we stand on this issue. So yes, it gives me a lot of hope.
Right. And so, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to, and I know Vincent would like to talk about this as well, but we're going to talk about that, about hope and about faith. and about progress, right? And so this seems like, so what you're talking about is we have not made any progress. And so some people will argue against that and say we have made progress. But I would like to invoke Dr. Kendi. He says that, yes, we have made racial progress, but we've also made racist progress. And so racial progress is met with racist progress. And so even when we take one step forward, we're taking a step backward, right? And so I think that's important to note. And I'm glad to see that there are so many people outside of the Black population, right, who are now engaging with the system to dismantle anti-Black oppression, because that is seriously, and we can talk about the importance of being labeled as a person of color, or people of color. We can talk about that later. But I do want to go to Commissioner Kedarious Colbert, who I will affectionately call in this panel discussion as KC. Now, I need you to do one thing before we hear from KC. I need you to say, "Happy birthday, KC," in the chat. Today is Kedarious Colbert's birthday. And I just need you to say, "Happy birthday, KC," because he's here to drop gems. He's here to share jewels on his birthday, all right? He could be doing something else in the midst of a viral pandemic, but he's here with us.
He really couldn't.
He could be doing something else, but he's here to share with us what he's learned, his experiences. He's here to share with us his characterization of America. Happy birthday, Kedarious Colbert. We love you. And tell us about the America that you know. What is the America that you know?
Thank you, Dr. Newman, and to this incredible panel and the organizers of this event. My name is Kedarious Colbert, as Dr. Newman has stated. I'm excited to join you and also listen to what my fellow panelists have stated as they characterize their experience. I typically am an optimistic person, but today I don't share, I believe, the same optimism that my fellow panelists share as it relates to what's happening right now. I think about it in terms of my experience as an African-American man growing up in deep East Texas, where racism was very forward. It was very apparent, and we knew as Black men, Black boys at that time, how to navigate those situations, who to date, where to go to school, where to be, where to hang out, who to play sports with. And we understood that while our city was, in terms of how we thought, integrated, in terms of how we lived, segregated, and still remains that way today. Further, I understand that as an African-American, having lived in Houston, DC, New York, Eastern Europe, and now the state of California, that my experiences have been very wide, and I've had to step in a number of circles, but also understand what me as a Black person being in those spaces means, and also understand what it means to others and how I have to successfully, I say, navigate those in order to survive. So I don't share the optimism, and here's why. I think and I'm glad you did the ask at the beginning to the community of saying Black Lives Matter. I don't share the statement. I don't say Black Lives Matter because I've said it, I know it, I live it. Being in a Black body is a form of resistance. Walking and being Black is knowing that Black lives matter, because every time I wake up, it could not. And so I'm glad that my white and non-Black counterparts are finally walking and holding up that labor of doing that labor of saying Black Lives Matter. I need them to say it. But we also have seen this song and dance before, where we start off optimistic. The corporations make their statements. They do their DEI dance. They do the inclusion, and then we go back to being the same people, or we recreate racism in new forms. And so the America that I know as a planning commissioner and someone in planning, I've seen how when we integrated communities or integrated schools, living in Orange County, while there aren't any racial restricted covenants, or there's not any exclusion of Black people or brown people or non-white people from living in this community, we understand that they created race neutral policies to prevent individuals from being able to live, to buy, and to really work in some cases in this community. By not paying people a living wage, they commute in and out, but by also the ability of not having the capacity to live in multifamily spaces because apartments truly don't exist here. And they're often pushed against. So that really excludes a particular person or class from being able to buy and live in that community. It further also means that individuals whom we think about, this city specifically exploded from a population perspective after the 50s and after individuals came back from war, but they didn't qualify for GI Bills or anything to build equity and buy homes like their white colleagues. And so while this America, I think about it, I know from, and I remain kind of hesitant to even get excited, is because I know how laws and policies can be rewritten. And until I see corporations who say Black Lives Matter start changing their boards, start changing where they deposit their banks, to banks start lending to Black people, until the legislation in the Senate, till we have more gubernatorial representation, till we have more Senate representation, till we stop using the language of progress, because what's just is not progressive. Women being able to vote is not progressive, it's right. Trans people being able to live experiences is not progressive, it's right. So these are things that I want us to change our language in how we think about the framework of how we are progressing, or think about this America being progressive. This America was built on foundational documents, which it just has not lived up to. And so that's not progressive. We just now need to be honest about who we are and where we have to go. So I'll stop there, but I'm really excited for the conversation this evening.
I'll stop there, but I'm really excited for the conversation. So that honestly, that is a lot to grapple with. And I should share something with you all, that Kedarious and I are debate partners. So we debate every day. I mean, seriously. I mean, if it's sometimes it's on Twitter, and sometimes it's via text message, and sometimes it's on a long 3-hour Sunday call. And so I have to push back on that just a little bit, because, like I said before, I am reading D. Ray's book. And if you've not read D. Ray's book, I would encourage everyone to pick it up. It's called On the Other Side of Freedom, The Case for Hope. All right. It's a really good book. And he says this. And so he talks about the ideas of faith and hope. He says that faith is the belief in that certain outcomes will happen. That is faith. He says that hope is the belief that certain outcomes can happen. Okay. So when you think about it, he says that when you lose faith, you can rely on hope, right? Because faith is the idea or the belief that certain outcomes will happen, and hope is the idea or the belief that certain outcomes can happen. So when we lose faith, we can rely on hope, right? And so when our hope wavers, then we can rely on our faith. And to protest, right? And to protest and to run for office, that is a symbol of hope. That means that you can envision a better future. That means that you can imagine a future that has not yet come. When you have no hope, that's when you give up, right? And so it's actually good to be optimistic about the future, because if you're not optimistic about the future, then what is the point of participating in a democracy where you don't see your vision come to fruition? So we have to be hopeful, right? That's why we're protesting, because we're hopeful in a better tomorrow. We're hopeful that our tomorrow will be better than today. And so I encourage the optimism that young people have right now. Now, what the question is, how long will white people remain interested in racial justice, right? Yeah. Because let's keep it real. It doesn't matter how hopeful we are, because Black people have always been hopeful, right? We have always believed in a better tomorrow, even when we were enslaved, I should say, right? Mm-hmm. We believed that a better tomorrow will come, right? So even during racial apartheid, we don't call it Jim Crow, we call it racial apartheid. We believed in a better tomorrow. We believed in a tomorrow that'll be better than today. So we cannot give up on hope, because if we give up on hope, then there's no reason to protest. There's no reason to run for office, right? So we've got to believe in a better tomorrow. We've got to remain hopeful. And the last thing I would like to say here is you're absolutely right. And I want to quote D. Ray here, because his thinking is at the forefront of my mind. He said this. He says that freedom is not only the absence of oppression, but it is also the presence of justice and joy, right?
Mhm.
It's also the presence of justice and joy. In order for us to get to a place where America is filled with justice, joy, and equity, we have to be hopeful in that day. We have to be hopeful in that day. And I want to bring in Vincent and Vincent to say, what do you think about this being hopeful in a better tomorrow, right? Should we be hopeful right now? All right, or is this just another dance that white America is performing, right? Is it racial theater? So it will subside eventually.
To a degree, it is. To a degree,
Yeah.
we've seen the people that are Instagramming and taking photos at the protests, that are shooting music videos at the protest, people that are just doing it for the Instagram aesthetic or for their social media to say. And then there are some people that are really doing things, companies like Netflix that are committing $100 million to non-white voices as creators over the next couple of years. And so I align with KC in that point that you've got to put your money and your policy and your decision makers where your mouth is. But to your point about hope, Langston Hughes' words come to mind. What happens to a dream deferred? You've got to wonder how long do people want to wait for hope? And Dr. King's words come when he says, how long, not long. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And he starts that speech off saying 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. And I'm here 50 years post that speech to say 150 years later, the Negro is still not free. Right. To say that 50 years after I have a dream, we're still not free. So what does happen to hope? I think what we see is this outburst of reaction. There are people that are very angry now. There are people that are, they don't have the time to dialogue like we do. Their only reaction is physical. Their only reaction is anger and rage, and it's not diluted anymore. It's not redirected anymore. It's more overt. And these are the people that are, throwing Molotov cocktails, at cops. And these are people. And what I've said to everyone that's called me about this and other, calls that I've been on to present is every single reaction that you're getting from a Black person is right. There is no wrong reaction right now as a Black person. Every reaction is right. Now, while I may not react the same way and while I may disagree with it, every reaction is warranted and right. When you look at the 400-year conversation that this has been, where we've never truly had weight in it, when you look at what caused the Emancipation Proclamation, when you look at what was the results of the Emancipation Proclamation, and when I say what caused it, I mean, like, it wasn't that Abraham Lincoln just had this thing on his heart so heavy, unlike the film would like to tell you. It was a strategic move. He was a chess player, and this was how he could win, was to attack the economy of the South. And so he decided that he would use his presidential pen to do so. And when you look at that and you zoom out, how different is that from anybody that makes a move to relegate something in their favor? But after the Civil War, we go into Reconstruction. All of a sudden, we have these Black people rising into power politically, and then that's quickly slammed down and shut down. And now we're back into sharecropping, and now we're still dealing with the 3/5 compromise and all these things. It's never been this right conversation. And I was sharing with someone about the tweet that President Trump put out last week, where he said something about let's do away with mail-in ballots. We voted just fine in World War I and World War II. We've voted okay before. And I looked at people that didn't see the problem in it, that it was overtly racist. Because in World War I and World War II, Blacks still were not able to vote properly. Especially Black women. And so when you talk to me about women's suffrage movement, and you talk to me about trans lives, and you talk to me about what's happening with the mail-in ballots and it being harder to vote, none of these views or these people have ever been properly represented. And so hope is a myth to many people. because as a Black woman, Harriet Beecher Stowe wasn't talking about you, sis. You know, as a Black trans person, you know full well that you've had to keep secrets in your life that straight people don't have to keep. And so what happens to hope when you see Black women killed by cops in their sleep and there's no justice, and the Black DA is celebrating his engagement to his white fiance at an all-white party?
Oh, that's the T?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Homeboy is 33 years old, married or engaged to a white woman. And he, this weekend, while people are still saying Breonna Taylor's name, he was at his engagement party, and the photos, he's the only Black person or one of two Black people in the photos. And so the Sunken Place comes to mind, and Jordan Peele comes to mind. And but to your point of hope, when things like that are our reality, hope is a myth, and hope works for some, and for others, it's like take your hope and go back to 2008 with it, because that didn't mean a thing.
Right. And I'm wondering if you know, hope needs to be activated, right? Mm-hmm. Because and we're going to bring Diya into this, and I'm thinking about before the deaths of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd, this idea of abolishing the police and abolishing prisons were pretty much not mainstream, right, as they are today. Right now, if we do a content analysis of the past from 2010 to 2019, how many articles were written about defund the police in comparison to just 2020 alone, right? I'm pretty sure in 2020 alone, we've seen more articles about defund the police and abolishing prisons than we've seen in the past 19 years. Someone can go and study that. And here's my thing. I'm wondering why we have this sort of surge in this idea of defunding the police in this campaign of abolishing the police, is because we're hopeful. We're hopeful. And let's bring in Diya into this. So Diya, what do you make of all of this?
Yeah, so I've been listening to your conversations right now, and also listening to conversations in the DC area. And, you know, while a lot of people say DC is not a real place and the Beltway is not a real place, in a way it is. And what I find, and I want to address your point about the theater and the performative, aspect of being racially right in this moment.
Come on.
And I am in that particular instance, I will actually agree with KC that a large part of what you're seeing, especially from large institutions, whether they're corporates, whether it is the Netflix doing the Black film genre, or the Prime, Amazon Prime that suddenly has this kind of selection of racially right films that we should see. I am not really very hopeful about all these performances by large institutions. All the DEI statements that you see from higher ed and from corporations and from large institutions and from citizen groups and from civil society organizations, a lot of that is, in my opinion, performative. We've seen how large organizations are very quickly able to use a political movement to score points on the public opinion, because they want to be seen on the right side of public opinion at this moment. Whether those statements actually translate into structural changes is yet to be seen. It's very easy. They have in their employ very talented writers, very talented communications managers. My personal professional background has been in strategic communication. So I personally know how campaigns are written. I know how corporations seize the moment. And so in that sense, in the performative aspect of doing the right thing, no, I'm not hopeful at all. It's a performance.
It's a performance. Now, something interesting just happened, Diya. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I thought you were next.
So in that, I am not at all hopeful. What I am hopeful in is the way that younger people are taking a much more active role. And I'm seeing this across the globe, and they're trying to see intersections. I see in India that young Dalit people are finding a just cause in the Black Lives Matter movement with their own struggles for caste-based inequities in India. I see young Jamaican and Caribbean immigrants in the UK and in Europe finding resonance with this movement and building on the momentum that this has given to them. I see it in Europe with African immigrants being able to find their voice. And so in that sense, I am hopeful that we are finally, as a people, as human beings, being able to see the intersections of where our humanity lies. That it isn't just about Black Americans, and it isn't just about Indians, and it isn't just about largely Caribbean immigrants in the UK. I think this moment has kind of brought a lot of these race-based injustices around the world to the fore. As a citizen of a post-colonial country, I will agree with I don't know whether it was Casey or Vincent who said that, who mentioned that, I think it was Vincent, about Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation and the whole movement at that time to abolish slavery, that it is never, freedom is never given. You have to take it. You have to grab it, you have to demand it, you have to fight for it, and it doesn't come without the cost of violence. I'm not advocating violence, but to think that power is ever transferred without violence, it doesn't happen. And ask anybody from any post-colonial country, their independence came at the cost of bloodshed. It did not come because there was a change of heart of the colonizer.
Okay. See, now I'm not going to speak on revenge because I want to keep this job. All right. I'm not going to speak on violence. Listen, for everyone who's out there, that was not me. I don't know who Chris
Johnson is. Yeah, that was it.
That was not me.
Newman.
All right. I just want to let that be known. All right. I need this job. I got a wife. Okay. I take care of my family.
Come on.
Okay. So let's move on. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I'm with you. We know that freedom, I think someone even said it here, that freedom is never free. We know that the only language that America knows is violence. We know that the first language of white people is violence. We know that. Right? The only way I think it was Frantz Fanon who says that violence yields only to greater violence, right? And so we know that. I talk a little bit about this in my piece in the SB Independent, and so anyway, if you want to pick that up. So again, let's bring. I want to move on. So again, I think this is very interesting. I will say that that Diya and Vincent definitely hit a complete 180 on me, because they started out very hopeful, and I'm like, oh, okay, they're all hopeful. And then I start talking about hope. They said, wait a minute, I'm not as hopeful as I may have come off in my opening speech. Okay, but that's all right. So I want to bring in KC, because KC, I've been following you on Instagram. I'm following you on Twitter, and you're talking a lot about Breonna Taylor. You're talking a lot about what's happening with, and again, we always talk about Black men when they are killed by police officers. But we rarely have ever have a national conversation about a Black woman, right? And so, yes, we talked about Sandra Bland, right? And we marched with intensity, right? And for a long time for George Floyd. But what's going on right now with Breonna Taylor? Why do you? So I just want to make this a very broad question, because I want you to go with this wherever you want to go with it. So what's happening right now, and how do you feel about what's happening with Breonna Taylor? What do you make of it?
I just want to be clear, you know, as a Black man, movements have always been about Black men, specifically civil rights movements. They have excluded LGBTQIA communities, as well as specifically Black women. But if you look at any image of any civil rights movement or any advocacy, the Black woman has always been at the forefront, using her body, using her voice, using her labor to not only birth new movement makers, but also to protect Black men, always. However, in the case of where violence or harm is brought against Black women specifically, you don't see that same advocacy. You don't see people standing up or speaking up. The importance of my use of my male privilege and my Black privilege, I guess, in the African-American community, what I want to express is that the Black Lives Matter movement has largely been associated with the death of Black men and Black boys. While Sandra Bland's death occurred, you do see a number of people who have ruled her death a suicide and will constantly perpetuate that narrative, which I believe is problematic because I don't think that's how her life ended. Further, when it comes to Atiana Jeffers and others, specifically with Breonna Taylor, you don't have the advocacy nor the action. And like you brought forth earlier, there's an African-American man who is the DA right now in the state of Kentucky, and he ran, and African-Americans on both sides of the aisle supported him, and he has not acted. The situation in which has kind of emerged specifically as we are advocating for Black Lives Matter and this uprising is happening is you see more posts saying, say her name. Because especially with George Floyd, it took the emergence of the murder of George Floyd for us to even begin the conversation with Breonna Taylor, or for that murder to gain traction. Also, I believe when we talk about saying her name, you see a number of people that say their name, say his name, which further is a part of the erasure that happens to Black women and Black trans women or cis women that have just been excluded historically from being represented and advocated for. So the Say Her Name movement is a specific representation for that advocacy and for that is separate and kind of birthed out of the Black Lives Matter movement. The reason why I go so hard for Breonna, because people aren't, that murder is so explicit. And while we don't have a video like we do of George Floyd, I don't even want to see a video, but what I read just factually just does not make sense. If 3 men in plain clothes come into your house at 1 a.m., you get your gun to protect yourself, and then you shoot, and then you are shot with 23 rounds, 8 piercing her body. Then you lock up the man who is trying to protect his girlfriend at the time. To protect their home. And it is.
And then in the report, you write that she had no injuries.
No injuries. And the report is largely absent of just facts. And there just had not been any traction. So Breonna Taylor, who was a 26-year-old woman, was killed in her own home while she was asleep because someone did not do their due diligence and justice has not been served. And so when you see people that just are not advocating for that, and when you see the criminal injustice system, as I would like to call it, stating that we're doing things, or we're ensuring that the facts are met, that we're allowing people, there's no time for that. So when people are burning things, they're burning down those symbols of police stations or rioting, as people like to call it. White people have always rioted in this country. It's the birth of this country. Violence has always been the continuation of change in this country. But when white people do it for sports or for other things, it's a problem. But when Black people do it, for some reason, it becomes problematic. For some reason, we should really rethink how we protest.
So
why do they have to do this? You know, so while Black people burn or loot or whatever, go forward. You know, I support that because I support the advancement of Black people. You know, and if states specifically are not going to bring justice, and the only way to bring justice is to burn down a building, I'd rather a building be burned any day than another Black body be killed, be hung, be lynched. And so people, when you contextualize it, and it goes back to the value conversation that you wrote about in the article, what truly are your values? Do we value buildings over bodies?
Come on.
So, and that's the thing and that's why I'm not as optimistic. I go back to that because corporations are now protecting their assets because they realize if they say Black Lives Matter, then it protects them, it shields them. However, are they truly for Black bodies? When it comes to reparations, when it comes to defunding or abolishing prisons or the police, you see questions, let's rethink this. When it comes to action, people begin to want to think differently. So let it burn until it doesn't burn anymore. Because if the reconstruction of this conversation of this country is what needs to happen, then that takes a lot of deconstructing and tearing down systems. And people don't like the process. They like the language of what that sounds like. But until we act, until we do, until we deconstruct, until we have the tough conversations, then we're truly not interested in advocacy and Black Lives Mattering.
Okay.
And people just like how it makes them feel.
So
they like how it makes them feel.
Drop KC if that was fire in the chat. Drop KC. Listen, I want to see waves of just KC if that was fire. KC, don't get me fired, man. Don't get me fired. Listen, that was fire. Drop KC if you're feeling that. And so let's bring Diya into this. And I feel like, listen, I'm just going to allow the conversation to just go. How would you like to respond to that, Diya? How would you like to respond? And then Vincent, you will follow up.
You know, this is exactly what I think Casey kind of amplified and did a better job, I think, of reiterating and reconfirming what I had started to say about the performative aspects of doing the right thing and not really liking the rhetoric, liking what it sounds like, liking what it represents, but not wanting to do the hard work of making those changes.
Come on.
The other thing that I want to talk to or address what Casey brought up was the devaluing of women's bodies and women's roles in the struggle, in the historic struggle of freedom in this country and in other places. It has always been women who have birthed the Black men, who have taken care of Black and brown men, who have taken care of the homes that were destroyed, and they had to rebuild those homes again, and they are never acknowledged to the full extent of their contribution to the struggle. And I've seen this in India. I've seen this in the way marginalized populations in India, in the caste structure, what they call the Dalit or the lower caste women, how they have been treated in India and disacknowledged. Their role is never highlighted, and there are roles that are prescribed for these women to celebrate. But when something happens to them and they get destroyed, we don't respond with the same level of total shock or the kind of reaction we get when we see a male body. So I think it's absolutely vital that we remember Breonna Taylor and the other women in this country, Black women, who have given up their lives for this movement. And it behooves us, I think, as a community, if we say Black Lives Matter And if we believe that Black Lives Matter, you cannot believe that without also believing that Black women's lives matter. You can't do that as two separate movements. It only is a true movement when you say Black women's lives matter.
Absolutely. Especially
Black
when...
women, listen, you know what to drop. Black women's lives matter. Listen, Diya,
True.
fire. Absolute fire. And if you're listening to what Diya is doing, and you may miss it because she's doing it so brilliantly, right? She's doing this. She's going, this is what's happening in India. This is what's happening in Europe. This is what's happening out in Asia, and then bringing it back to America, right? So it's this sort of global analysis, right, about what's taking place in America. So it's a real sophisticated analysis about what's taking place in America. So I love where this conversation is going. And before we move to the next question, I want to bring Vincent Powell into this. So Vincent, you know, we're listening to this idea that nothing is going to change. I don't know if we believe that we are powerless. Is that what we're saying? If we're not optimistic, are we then powerless? Like, help me make sense of this and help the audience make sense. If we're not hopeful, then what can we do to bring about change? Because why? And then also tell us, why aren't police officers ever held accountable, right? And so what can we do if we're hopeful? If we're hopeful, what can we do to bring about some social and political change?
You will not rest that question on my shoulders. Why aren't cops held responsible? But I want to roll back just for one split second to Diya's point and Casey's point of intentionally talking about Breonna Taylor and Black women. And people don't realize the weight that's on the Black woman's back, and how the Black woman is the individual that carries all of society. Mm-hmm. If it weren't for the Black woman, masses children would have never learned to read. Ooh. If it wasn't for the Black woman, there would only have been sex between Massa and his wife. But then he found more attraction to the Black woman and would sleep with her, would rape her, and make her birth his children. And this is where we get people of mixed and interracial makeup, and then have the nerve to call them mulatto in that time, even though it was white men who were raping them, right, and giving them their seed, and then disowning them, disbarring them, and pushing them all away. And the Black woman was the chef, was the waitress, was the cook, was the nurturer, was the educator. And if you didn't know what I said before the sentence I just said, I could be talking about the Black woman now, who is the cook and the nurturer and the educator and the chef. And she's never been given. The essential worker. Breonna Taylor was an essential worker. Absolutely. Come on, Diya, with the fire, with the
drop Diya in the chat right now. Drop Diya in the chat right now.
Diya, the arsonist.
Inundate us with Diya in the chat right now.
But seriously,
and the Vincent, white man has done this around the world. They have raped women that they have had power over. In the colonized world, the colonizer has raped the native women, given birth to who have had to bear their children. And then those children are called half castes, and in India they were called chichis, which means dirty, not right.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a global and historical trajectory of what white men in power have done over Black women.
And what gets me the most when we talk about it is Breonna Taylor was a first responder. She wasn't just an essential worker. She wasn't just a someone that worked at the post office. And while postal workers are very much essential, she was a first responder. She saved lives. Lives were in her hand.
Come on.
Not packages. Lives were in her hand.
Come on.
And for her life to be taken and for us to ignore it and to pretend it's not about race, and to pretend that people empowered can't do something about it.
Right.
I couldn't sleep for about 4 nights when it first happened. And I think one thing that I tell people, especially people that supported the president, was there's no way that you could love women and support the president.
Come on.
Secondarily, there's no way that you could love Black women and ignore what's going on with Breonna Taylor. And there's no way that you could value life and be able to push aside any of these wrongful deaths. And so when you ask, now to your question, when you ask, are we hopeless, and are we, have we just relented, or have we just relinquished our fight? It's not that. I think that it's fear, and it's not the fear of the fact that more lives will have to be lost, more blood will have to be shed in order for us to achieve what we're talking about. We'd like to think that one life is enough. We'd like to think that Dr. King's blood should have got us somewhere, and that Malcolm X's blood and Medgar Evers' blood, and so on and so forth, all the way down to Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. But the blood of individuals isn't enough when the police force as recent as the 80s will bomb major cities to destroy Black communities. When forces that are corporate and political would destroy Greenwood, Oklahoma, what was known as Black Wall Street. When you look at that, I think right now what we're seeing is just an awakening and an awareness. I think it was around Juneteenth when I realized, oh, white people have been sleep. Like, y'all didn't know, not because you didn't know, but because you never wondered. And so that it's like an awakening that's happening. But what comes after this awakening is bloodshed. And there is a thing where things have to be taken into their own hands. You talk about apartheid. Look at South Africa. You look at Australia. You look at these other countries where it was not enough. And even the Civil War that Black men fought, that slave owners got their slaves and rallied them up and made them fight to stay slaves. This same country has never had a true race war. We've flirted with it. It scared us. And it's been one of those things where Blacks feel like, well, we finally have X, Y, or Z. Let's not do anything to destroy that. It's the same conversation that I'm hearing people have about coronavirus, where they're saying, well, let's just take all the restrictions off and let people risk their lives. Somebody on my Instagram today said, we don't need another bailout. We just need people to face fear and go to work. And I said, there's no reason why someone that works at Ross or at a bar should be facing fear to go to work. Cops face fear, firefighters face fear. There's no reason why you should be telling someone that works in a department store, face your fear and go work this checkout line. Okay. But if you look at the fact that the American economy has never supported you, you look at healthcare, while we're talking about other countries, you look at healthcare in progressive countries that may not have the net worth or the GDP of America, but they've got the common sense to say that a woman giving birth to a child shouldn't be paying $25,000. My wife's bill was $25,000 for my son, not even 2 years ago. And the fact that you're expected to pay that or just have a hell of an amazing insurance policy, thank God for the latter. But we live in a country where we want our lights to stay on, and we want, our little bit of dollars that we're getting in to our hard-earned dollars to go towards something. And so it's this fear to just keep your lifestyle going. On the white side, it looks very different because their fear is wealth. They got afraid of coronavirus and they immediately started bailing out the airlines. They said that billionaires since March have made almost $600 billion off of the coronavirus. You look at the bailout that was given, the $1,200 per American, there were 400 and some odd millionaires that got $1.2 million checks from the government. And people are like, well, they're write-offs, they're tax write-offs. It doesn't matter. This country is built for those with means, and you have minorities that have never had those means start to get a taste of those means, and the fear to lose all that is what drives them from not taking a billy club and going and knocking the hell out of a cop or a judge or a DA and taking this into their own hands. When you look and you do a microscopic investigation on what's happening in Seattle, in that quadrant that's being taken over and becoming autonomized, you see that these were people that were just brave enough to say hell no. And that, unfortunately, and you don't need to say it, Dr. Newman, but what Diya is saying is correct. And what KC is saying is correct. Burn it all down. Because this is what we worship. This is what this country worships is property and wealth. And until you make that equally attainable for everyone, this is not the land of the free. This is the home of the brave. The sea, the shining sea, is murky and it's dirty. It's trash. The flag is an emblem of suffering and shame that Blacks relent. I hate the idea of flags. My neighborhood is trying to put flags up for the 4th of July. I'm going to quickly pull mine out of the ground, because if you think that Blacks aren't patriotic, and the argument of Colin Kaepernick comes up about kneeling and crap, when Blacks are the most patriotic people, they fought to keep slavery for their slave masters. They are the most patriotic people. They designed our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., physically designed it. They are the most advanced people. They made the washing machine and the hair dryer and the stoplight. And I could go on that whole. Blacks are, we are inherently inventive, because we know what it is to be without. So we take resources and make things. Those things get capitalized on. The cotton gin, Eli Whitney. You look at all those things, and then you zoom all the way out and say, oh my God, here we are in 2020. Are we without hope, or does it mean that it's going to get worse before it gets better? The truth of the matter is, obviously, people aren't responding. And unless all of this performance media is going to have some things behind it, unless you're going to see white people step down, like the one of the founders of Reddit, Serena Williams' husband, he stepped down, unless you're going to see people make moves like that. But what I'm seeing is, and I'm done after this sentence, what I'm seeing is the people that are apt to make the big moves are people that are either married to Black people, or they have Black people close within their personal circles. So it's not enough just to hire it. And something I posted today said, if race isn't a thing, let's take it off of applications for homes and for jobs.
Listen. That was a lot to unpack.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it was.
That was a lot to unpack. But I think that you made a brilliant point when you talked about the juxtaposition between nationalism and patriotism. And Dr. Michael Eric Dyson writes about this in his book. What is it? A Sermon to White America, right? Or Tears We Cannot Stop, a Sermon to White America. He talks about this. He says that, look, nationalism isn't the uncritical support of your nation, right? It's uncritical support, meaning your nation can do no wrong. You support it no matter what. That's nationalism, right? That nationalism is basically white people, right? White people love this nation. Oh, we love this nation so much. This nation has done no wrong. But patriotism, you love your country so much, right? That you're critical of it because you know that it could be better. You know that it could be better. And that is patriotism. Black people are the most patriotic people in America. People of color are the most patriotic people in America, because we are the ones who are critical of this nation, because we believe, we imagine a America that is better than what it is today. And so we have not heard from KC in a while. And again, before we move forward, I have to say this. Drop VP in the chat. VP, we let you go for 6 minutes. We let you go for 6 minutes, brother. I didn't want to cut you off. I didn't want to cut you off.
It was spitfire.
But it was fire. Let's drop VP. We appreciate that. We appreciate that sermon, brother. We appreciate that. That verbal dissertation. All right, Casey, listen. So and I love everyone on this on the panel. And so again, the title of this panel is The America We Know: Black Liberation, Media Representation, and the Digitization of White Supremacy. So let's move to that media representation part. And before we get there, listen, I want this to be an open conversation. And we talked a little bit about this. And how are Black people characterized in media? Okay, so if you think about it, it's a broad question, but I want you to take it wherever you want to go with it. Because I want to go somewhere with this. How are we characterized in film? How are we characterized in the news media? How are we characterized even on these dominant platforms such as Netflix and Hulu, right? How are we characterized? And then when you answer that question, I want you to follow it with, in what ways, if any, do those characterizations have an impact on how law enforcement sees us, right? And so I want to have this conversation, and not only law enforcement, but how white people see us, right? And again, I think that Ava DuVernay, did a brilliant series on when they see us, right? When they see us, and we know they is a code word for white people, right? So when white people see
word.
yeah, it's because some people may not know. Some people may not know. Some people are very, listen, I want to keep this job, but this is Dr. Crystal Fleming. It's not me. Dr. Crystal Fleming says this. She wrote a book called How to Be Less Stupid About Race. She said this, Casey and Diya. She said this. People are just racially stupid. Her words, not mine. I'm not saying people are stupid. I'm saying that that's what she said. She said that some people are just racially stupid. All right. And so I want to know how does media, right? How do media platforms sort of contribute to racial stupidity in America and how people see us? Casey.
All right. So this is a great question. And I want to circle back because it helps me frame the correction that I want to make in this conversation.
Okay.
And I want to do this because I feel like it's important. And I think it's something that I'm unlearning and have learned over the past couple of months. And I immediately saw it, and I continuously hear it. When talking about Breonna Taylor, we immediately talk about her as an essential worker or an EMT. We immediately began to define the Black lady, the Black woman, by her labor. Once more, her contribution, never by her being. We don't automatically start to define Black men. We automatically start to define Black women, though, as if it makes them more valuable because of what they're contributing. And so I find that type of characterization from the media primarily to be problematic, and the perpetuation, because even if she were not employed, which could have definitely been a possibility at that time, at the beginning of COVID-19, but she could have been unemployed. And then how would she have been characterized? As an Angie Mama, as an unemployed welfare queen? Like, how would she have been characterized in that way? Would we have advocated for her then? Or would she not have been worthy of being represented?
Right.
I feel like the torch that we carry now is because, look at her, she was so great. But that goes into the way which media depicts the perfect victim or the perfect person that we want to characterize, and how media says, oh, well, Michael Brown, New York Times, I think, said he was no angel. Yeah. So we begin to think about how you have to be perfect in order to be killed in this country.
Right.
And these things are very problematic. And they start with how media sees us. To be seen in this country, to be heard in this country, to even enter the white imagination.
Come on.
You have to be beyond excellent.
Come on.
The gravitas of wanting to be tied to great institutions or Ivy Leagues somehow it makes you so much better. It makes you so much valuable. But white men and women can just be as mediocre, but somehow in their deaths and even in their lives, they're valued over Black lives. And so I find that really troubling. And I think about us trying to have conversations about The Little Mermaid, us trying to have conversations about Harriet Potter. The fact is, Black people aren't even allowed in the white imagination. We aren't even allowed to exist in cartoons and other fictionalized shows.
We have white actors playing Black characters. Voice
And
of
I was
black
going, I was going there
Right.
because white people have agency to think that they understand the Black experience. However, Black people can or people of color, period, are not allowed to go into that, to even enter the psyche of being able to articulate and voice the white experience. When I think we know more than they do. White people, we live in a segregated society. We don't go to school together often. Even you said it at the top of the call, the percentage of African Americans at SBCC. So think about that. But Black people have nursed, fed, raised, worked in white communities, been educated. We can voice a white character. We can lead a white household. In fact, we can run a white country. And we showed that we did it better than anybody else. And so when thinking about when anybody that wants to talk about how white people being able to, why are white people just allowed to have that type of agency and it not be, I didn't even understand, I didn't know that so many white people were voicing Black characters. How is this even allowed? And I saw the conversations on Twitter recently where Asian Americans were thinking about how when they go before, when they're considered for roles, they're often pushed against or saying, no, you shouldn't, you couldn't really represent a white person. We've always had to play white. We've always had to play white in society to survive, to navigate. We've been acting our whole lives.
Yeah,
talk about a mask.
They wear the mask. Come on, Claude McKay. Come on.
And so if anybody knows how to perform in this country, it's Black people. And we still don't get the Oscars that we deserve. We still don't get the Emmys we deserve. We still don't have that representation at the Academy, and we don't have it on the back end as the directors. We can still talk about Ava DuVernay.
Even when the Academy had a Black president, a Black female president for the last 4 years, still not getting, the recognition.
But think about that symbolism of Blackness and how oftentimes it's we as Black, and I'm saying Black people, we get into positions and we think, well, we can't go too fast, too far. We can't take them too fast. When the Obama administration entered and he had the control of the House and the Senate for that first 2 years, like, why didn't he do as much? It's like, well, you can't take them too fast. You just got here. You're the first one. You can't do that much. Take them slow, take them easy. Then we lose it and we have to fight for everything. And then the next administration comes in and he does everything and he tests the strength of our Constitution each and every single day. Every single day.
Right.
And it's allowed, it's not protested, but we as Black people have to be careful. And to your point, Vincent, why? Why do we have to be so safe?
Wait, okay, let's stop there. Let's stop there because I definitely want to bring in Diya.
Yeah.
That was, again, a lot to unpack. Diya, jump in.
That is a lot. And it is. I'm going to talk a little bit to media representation.
Yes.
I think culture is probably one of the strongest vehicles ever to change minds, to change ideas, and to change mindsets. And I think that is the domain that will be guarded most in terms of representation. They will allow the true representation of Black people and colored people and brown people and Asian Americans and immigrants. That will be the domain that will be touched last because it is the most powerful.
Right.
They will not allow that space to be changed easily. And therefore, you have to look at the political economy behind the entertainment industry. Who owns these industries? Who has the power to make those changes? Where is the money coming from for these industries? Whether it's news media, whether it's the culture industry, whether it is the music industry, these are owned primarily by white America. And it is America's most strongest vehicle ever. So you can be sure that media representation will be the last frontier that they will change. So everything that we're seeing is us clawing it back very, very slowly. And culture change is what, they will let you have the Black music. They will let you have the little fusion going on between Bollywood and Hollywood, and they will do all of that. But they will be measured, and they will be allowed to the extent that the dominant cultural hegemony persists.
Come on.
And so if we have to change the way people's mindsets work, culture is really one of the most important sites to take back.
I want to jump in just for a moment and talk about how actors like Morgan Freeman, Viola Davis, and Samuel L. Jackson, a lot of their most popular performances were for roles that were not, and also Will Smith and Denzel Washington, were for roles that were not written for Black people. And it's always the comment of, oh my God, you blew us away. Especially Morgan Freeman in like Shawshank Redemption. That was supposed to be a white man. And you see that thing where we have to perform, to Casey's point, we have to be so good that oh my gosh, we do see how this could be written for you or work for you. I want to just drop a couple of stats really quickly. In a script, when a script calls for a gang member, a gangster, or a thug, or a gangbanger, over 65% of the time it's written as a role of a Black man.
Okay, speak on it. Don't hold back.
In reality, Blacks, and this is from the National Gang Center, Blacks comprise of 35% of gang violence and gang-related crimes, while whites comprise of 12% of gang-related crimes, Hispanic people 46%, and other 7%. But in film, 64% of roles, and that's from 160,000 roles surveyed by the numbers.com in 26,000 films, 64% of them, a disproportionate amount, were written for and given to Black people. And I don't like to just say numbers. I like to also provide proof. But here is the first link I just sent you is an amazing podcast that I love. It's called Uncivil. It has nothing to do with media, but it's an amazing one about why whites worship the Confederate flag. And
you just gonna throw that in there.
We're talking about
you just gonna throw that in there.
Anyway, but the Vox link is a link to a bunch of infographics about it, and it's really it's a big disadvantage, especially as a writer, director, producer. It's hard to navigate a space when it's hard to get representation.
Come on.
Because the agents and the managers don't know how to view your work.
Come on.
And so they're like, oh my God, send us something you've done. And then you send it and it's super Black or it's super representative of your culture. And they're like, well, once you get 1 million views on YouTube, we'll circle back. And you get these breakout artists like Ava DuVernay. And even, Spike Lee, of course. And Spike Lee said a couple of years ago, he said, it's easier for a Black person to become the president of the United States than to become a head of a studio. Because those heads of studios are ran by people that have been there for years, and they are white people by far, and they protect white spaces. And when you look at channels like CBS, you can't name a bunch of shows on CBS about Black people like you can on ABC, where there's Blackish, Mixedish, Scandal, Grey's Anatomy, How to Get Away with Murder. But that's also because Channing Dungey became the head of television at ABC. She's a Black woman. She started greenlighting shows by Shonda Rhimes, a Black woman who was elevating Black voices. But these other channels didn't have Black people in place to empower Black creators and Black actors and Black writers.
So
you find this disproportionate thing that happens where there's no money to give room for Black people to tell their story, and then they go to OWN, and the production value drops because Tyler Perry has figured out how to take a dime and stretch it because he doesn't get enough opportunities. And so here we are, all at the mercy of Tyler Perry or Oprah, because outside of them, nobody else is greenlighting Black shows. And so we stay with these stats because there's no one else that's saying, hey, wait, all thugs aren't black. And my last point is just looking at like cops getting canceled, live PD getting canceled, and shows like that further inundate us and let us watch white cops beat black people or pull black people over. I believe that will help the subconscious psyche, but it's a start. It's not enough. But I'm glad that those kinds of shows are gone, because the police officer is the only role that you can put into any script and it will make sense. There's no place in imagination or the world where law enforcement does not exist. You could be writing a show about KKK in space and a cop could show up. A cop can show up anywhere, and because we've propped them up so well media wise, that's what we're fighting, is these people that feel invincible because they've seen themselves as invincible on television.
And so what you're talking about, Vincent, let me just add this one little point. What you're talking about is this concept that I think that Trevor Noah coined it like a week ago. He says propaganda, which is a great term, propaganda.
It's a great term.
It's a great term. And so it's funny, but it's so true, right? Again, I think he talks about this. He says that only 21% of Americans come into contact with a police officer every single year, right? And majority of those people are black and brown. So why do white people love cops so much? They're never interacting with them. He says it's because of propaganda. It's because of what they see on television. White people generally believe that police officers are out there really fighting and stopping crime. But they aren't. They're really terrible at preventing crime. They're really terrible at preventing crime. So white people, why do you love cops so much? It's because of propaganda. It's because of the implicit biases that you hold as a result of being indoctrinated by news media.
Come on.
Literally. That's why you love cops so much.
KC, you were about to say something.
KC, go ahead and jump in there, man.
Well, I was going to say that they've already militarized space with the Space Force. And so we're kind of behind that, recently. But to Donte's point just now, living in Orange County, and we're having a conversation about defunding the police, to your earlier point, Donte, and my advocacy for that, not only defunding, but ultimately the abolishment of police. And so that might be an unpopular opinion, but it's one that I hold and a truth that I believe in. Because living in Orange County living in Orange County and having moved here from DC, I understood how that Black community primarily was over-policed, and how living in Orange County, I rarely see the police. Specifically here between Costa Mesa, Orange County, and Costa Mesa, Newport, and Irvine, you rarely interact with police departments, unfortunately, unless you're being called on, the police are being called on you for being Black in your community, which happened to me. But other than that, they're not here. And so to your point, I don't understand why we spend such a large portion of our municipal budgets on things that we really don't need. If we looked at the effectiveness of police officers, and we looked at, hey, we have this department and in our city, they have a large budget. However, we've determined that they don't need this amount. Typically, you defund. You look at it's reallocating the funds. And I don't want to tie into the argument of reallocation of funds as opposed to the labeling of defunding the police, because defunding the police is a strategic and historic tactic to the ultimate abolishment of the police. So I'm not saying that we should relabel it reallocation of funds, because it is the defunding. It's the elimination of officers and the need for those. And so when I think about it, the thing that, and I've recently released a video about this and the challenges that I have, is why are we so afraid to imagine a world without prisons and police? What is it that frightens us so much to think about people in our community, our neighbors, that need to be locked behind bars? Why can't we reimagine how we rehabilitate our communities? Why are we so tied to the notion that we must criminalize, people must first off be criminalized, and then the penal code, which disproportionately imprisons Black and brown bodies? Why do we support that? When data shows that there are more people who have been imprisoned that now live in society. I think there's like 73% of people that have been imprisoned now live in society and are out here with us. Right. And then there are I believe there's 80 3%, I believe is the stat, of individuals that are in prison for nonviolent offenses. So they can come out and you're not in danger. Prisoners being released, for some reason, you're not in danger. It's because of marijuana or some other nonviolent offenses. But somehow we think specifically in this state, the growth of the prison industrial complex is high. The amount of money that we spend as a state towards prisons and the allowance and growth of prisons is unbelievable and should not be allowed. It's when we think about it, and I work in schools and school planning, when we think about the amount of money that we invest in building prisons versus when we attempt to place things on a ballot to build new schools for our kids to be educated in, the legislative arguments that you hear from people that are not willing to build great facilities, but are willing to support building new prisons is disgusting here in the state of California. And so you think about that and you begin to just understand, why is it so difficult for us to start to reimagine, deconstruct, and ultimately disappear police officers in prisons in this country? I'm taking up a lot of space as a Black man. I want to be cognizant of the space that I'm taking up. So I'm going to dial back.
Okay, Black man. All right, so really quickly, so I want to have two conversations simultaneously. Okay, so Casey, I'm glad that you introduced the movement to defund the police, or the movement to abolish the police, right? And the movement, and like you told me before, you cannot talk about abolishing the police without talking about abolishing prisons, right? And so let's talk about that conversation while simultaneously talking about the digitization of white supremacy. You cannot talk about defunding the police or abolishing the police without talking about the digitization of white supremacy, right? You've got to talk about that, because right now in major cities, right, when we talk about police budgets, you know why those police budgets are increasing every year, right? Because they're purchasing new surveillance technology for social control to monitor and surveil Black people. So that's what we mean when we talk about the digitization of white supremacy. Where did you get the money for helicopter policing? Where did you get the money for drones to be flying over our protesters' heads? Where did you get the money? So you cannot talk about defunding the police or abolishing the police without talking about how white supremacy is implicated in technology. Listen, I would encourage everyone right now, this is just a sidebar. I know many of you have Facebook. Go to Facebook right now. Go to Facebook right now. Log into your Facebook account. Now go to the About section. Now it's going to ask you a ton of questions about yourself. It's going to say, what is your gender? It's going to say, what is your political orientation? It's going to ask you, what is your religious views? It's going to ask you, where do you live? What schools you attended? You know what's the one question that it would never ask you? What is your race? Think about it. Now go to Facebook. Now, it's not only Facebook. We've got to talk about, now listen, white people are generally, subscribe to the ideology of color blindness. People of color do not. I mean, hell, it's people of color. Color is an indication of race, right? Honestly, I'm not going to reveal. But here's the thing. So we've got to talk about how race is imbued in technologies, right? And we cannot have this conversation about about abolishing police without talking about the technologies that they use to uphold and reinforce white supremacy. So I want to go to Diya. Diya, talk to us a little bit about surveillance technologies, about algorithms that police are using to predict criminals, future criminals. And the last thing I want to say is this. I teach argumentation and debate. And I taught it this morning from 10:30, I believe it was 10:30 to 12:30. And right now we're focusing on fact debates. And I see some of my students are here. And I asked my students to come up with fact propositions, right? And there are 3 different types of fact propositions. There's a past fact, right? Climate, or you might say a past fact is something like the moon landing was a hoax. There's a present fact. Donald Trump is the worst president of all time. And there's a future fact. Donald Trump will not be reelected. My students came up with something, and this to me communicated hope. They said that American cities will abolish police, right? And so before we get there, before we get there, we've got to talk about surveillance technologies. Take us away, Diya. Talk to us about the digitization of white supremacy and biometrics and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Take it away, Diya.
Oh, here we go.
Before I talk about surveillance technologies as a very modern phenomena, I will encourage you all to read a book by Professor Simone Brown called Dark
Yes.
Matters. And she talks about surveillance, and she places surveillance right from the transatlantic slave trade, about
Yes.
how Black bodies were treated as property and branded like cattle,
Come
like
on.
animals, and then watched over to make sure that they stayed within physical boundaries of those plantations which had bought them. And right from the slave ships to the plantation, they have been surveilled. So when we talk about surveillance technology, I think it's very important to understand the historical kind of legacy of surveillance of Black bodies. It did not start with facial recognition. It did not start with drone technology. It has not started with predictive policing. It started from the very first Black body that was forced and bought and brought into this country. So please understand surveillance in that historical context.
Right.
And then if you look at surveillance and surveillance technologies, you will find that the people in power, and in this case, white America, has simply improved on technologies of the time to surveil on Black and brown bodies. So it began with the shackles, it moved to other, to branding, it moved to prisons, it moved to keeping the lantern laws of the 19th century New York, and then we moved to the policing, the over-policing of Black neighborhoods. And today we come to digital technology. So when we talk about surveillance technologies, please understand that you have to step back all the way down into the transatlantic slave ship to understand why surveillance has been the technology that has been used from 400 years back. It is not today's technology. However, given that background, I will say that current technological capacities of speed and of scale have certainly exacerbated and made this even more dangerous than ever before. However, the hopeful point in all of this is, and we don't know how long it will last, but for the very first time after years of Black women, particularly Black women who have been working in technology, and I'm talking about people like Joy Boalmani, I'm talking about people like Professor Ruha Benjamin, I'm talking about people like Mutale in Conde, I am talking about these women who have been talking about algorithmic bias. I'm talking about Dr. Safia Noble, and they have been talking about the bias in technologies, inherent bias, racial and gendered bias in technologies, and nobody has been paying attention. And it has taken them this long that today we are at least at the point where Amazon and IBM and Microsoft and Google have made the first step towards saying they will not sell facial recognition technology to law enforcement. So that is a first step. Let me though say that law enforcement buys its facial recognition technology from many smaller vendors beyond the Amazon. But it is the first time in tech history that they have said, yes, there is a problem with the technologies that we're building and the inordinate surveillance of Black communities. And so that, if we were talking about hope and optimism, I would take that as a glimmer of hope.
Okay.
The tech industry is finally acknowledging that, yes, there is a problem in what we're doing.
Absolutely.
And we're going to stop selling.
Diya, so really quickly, Diya, I want to ask you this before we have to wrap up because this thing ends at 6, and I want to get some questions, and then Vincent, you'll answer the first question from the audience. In a very concise, and I'm sorry, did I cut you off, Diya? I think I did.
No, that's fine.
All right, try not to, I don't want to do the man thing, right? Where we interrupt women. But Diya, let me ask you this question really quickly. Do algorithms, do facial recognition technologies overwhelmingly misidentify Black and brown people? And if so, have they falsely arrested a Black person because of because of a facial recognition mistake?
Yes, and this is the shocking part, that it is just now in 2020 that the first acknowledged, it doesn't mean it's the first case, it's the first media acknowledged case of a person being misidentified for a crime using facial recognition technologies and profiled databases. And this was in Detroit. I'm forgetting the gentleman's name.
Robert Williams. Robert Williams in Detroit, the Green Light Project.
Yes, the very first time that it has been acknowledged, partly because when they use these databases, when they use these AI databases against which they match a surveillance camera grab of a person's face who is committing the crime, they are doing this often without telling the person that we're picking you up based on a database that we have. Not because a witness has identified you.
Come on.
The opacity in which law enforcement uses facial recognition is also to be questioned, that they are replacing actual witness lines with this facial recognition technology, and the role of higher ed institutions in whitewashing these technologies. Most facial recognition technologies used by law enforcement, used by the criminal justice system, have actually, for the most part, been verified and vetted by educational higher ed institutions. There is a criminal justice system that is used in Florida, I think it is, called Compass. And it has been written about in terms of how they judge recidivism between offenders. And it has been found that it has inordinately shown that Black offenders will be more recidivist for the same crime than white offenders. And therefore, Black offenders are given much longer sentences, much harsher sentences than for the same crime committed by a white person. And this is the kind of predictive sentencing using flawed technology. So technology is not objective. That is a myth. Technology is not neutral. That is a myth. And it has been shown now more so than ever. And just today, one of the most important databases cited and used in academic institutions training AI systems around the country, the MIT database, has just been shown up to be racially and gendered and flawed. And they have just come out. This is the MIT database that is used as a training set. This data set is the most cited and widely used data set for training algorithms and building AI technologies, has just today been shown. And so what does MIT come out with? An apology. We are so sorry. We did not know.
We didn't know. Right. And so
this is the role of anti-Blackness, white supremacy, and technology. And to think that technologies are neutral and objective is a myth of Silicon Valley tech culture and the tech white culture.
Drop Diya in the chat right now.
Yo.
Listen, drop Diya in the chat right now.
Diya came with the
drop
tea.
Diya in the chat. Dr. Diya Basu in the chat. And so listen. So listen, and so now you understand the importance of why you cannot talk about abolishing the police without talking about defunding our reliance or our over-reliance on citywide police surveillance, right? Systems. You cannot talk about defunding the police without talking about not giving any money to police surveillance technologies. So listen, we could go on and on. We want to take some questions from the audience. Roxane, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yeah, we definitely do have some questions. I just want to say thank you so much to all of our panelists so far. This is incredible. Absolutely want to continue some of these conversations that we've been talking about tonight. Definitely going to talk again about police and digital surveillance of communities of color. Definitely can come back and talk about media representation and the impact of those things. So for everyone watching today, stay tuned. We are going to be back. Donte and I will be working up some great stuff and doing this again. So one of the questions that came up that I think might be the one that we can get to tonight is quite good. So I'm going to read it to you, and then I'm going to pop, and then I'll drop it in the chat so you can read it.
Okay.
In The New Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander discusses how every time there's a movement away from a system of oppression, a new system is already ready to take its place.
Oh, come on.
For instance, when slavery ended, there would become the Jim Crow. Right. Do any of the panelists have any idea of what might be coming down the line after the achievements we hope to see during this moment in history? So anyone anticipating, like if we start to work on making some change, what might be coming after that?
That's a really great question. So let's go to Vincent. Thank you so much, Roxane. Let's go to Vincent.
I want to kindly pass that to Diya.
Yeah, I will take that because I strongly believe that our reliance on digital technologies are going to grow as we move forward. I think we are without a doubt doing this on a digital platform at a time when we can't be physically together. Our reliance on technologies of communication are going to change into what my mentor and PhD advisor, Dr. Donadis, calls internet-enabled technologies, from technologies of communication to technologies of control. And that is the way in which we're moving. Everything we do is being recorded about us. And there will be populations whose digital footprints will be surveilled on more than others. So as a younger generation that adopts technology very readily, that is much more enthusiastic about technologies, I also urge you to be intensely critical whenever somebody sells you a technology that is smart, somebody sells you a technology that's efficient, somebody sells you a technology that's objective, somebody sells you a technology that's neutral. I urge you to be intensely and conscientiously and intentionally critically aware about who built that technology, what went into that technology, who were the people behind the design of the technology, and who is it going to benefit? So before you take on, so I think the technological sphere, the digital public sphere, as we have been calling it over the last 15 or 20 years, I think that is going to be the next frontier of control. And we have to be much more mindful, much more critical, and hold tech companies much, much more accountable to all of us if we want to be able to resist this control.
Casey, how do I respond to that? That's beyond the purview of my knowledge. Casey, what do you see? Because Diya and I had this conversation when we were talking about the unintended consequences of abolishing the police, right? And she says that, well, listen, if we end up abolishing the police, we know that white supremacy is sneaky and tricky, right? And so what they're going to end up doing is just creating new facial recognition technologies that already misidentify people of color at higher rates than they misidentify white people. And so that means that whatever takes its place, Black and brown people will still be harmed. And so we have to talk about abolishing the police with also defunding citywide police surveillance systems. And so Casey, to answer that brilliant question by an audience member, what do you see sort of emerging, right, as this new system if we talk about abolishing prisons, right, or abolishing police? What could happen, right, if we're not hopeful? Like, what could happen? How would racism reinvent itself?
I think the assumption that there must be a framework to govern society and that we are incapable of governing ourselves is also, there's something there. While nothing initially comes to mind of what replaces it, because when I think about reimagining it, I don't see a void. I don't see police in my community today. So in my mind, the police do not exist already here in Orange County. And so me just being able to navigate through whiteness in this Black body, I understand that it's completely possible for us not to exist. When it comes to the technological components, I do understand that I am being tracked and monitored when I do things. So even in my advocacy on social media, I don't participate in hashtags. Even in my advocacy on social media, you will not likely see me doing a lot of things but I understand that my voice and publishing my voice is gonna be tracked in a certain way. But I know that police departments are using surveillance to monitor. That's why I don't retweet or repost videos of those that are marching, because I understand that Black people, specifically those leaders, they're often targeted and come up hurt or harmed or imprisoned or targeted. And we see that. And so the police, they use like Facebook as a tool. Facebook is a junior partner to the criminal justice system. They are another part of the pipeline to criminal justice. And so we have to be careful of what we are putting on there, because that we understand that the way in which freedom is being achieved, the liberation and the movement work that is being done is primarily been done by social media, because that's the way we're getting our voice heard. So that system, those systems, Twitter, we see that the next wave of congressional laws are targeted toward tech and silencing. We see Facebook and Twitter are taking sides. And so it's gonna be who will fact check, who will censor, and who will be allowed ultimately to speak and to be heard. And so maybe that's it. I think it's what Diya said, which I mean, just so well, and I'm gonna have to do a lot of research and digging, because just to understand how the digitized space is going to be enforced and policed and will target disproportionately Black bodies, because we don't have a lot of Black people in tech, specifically in NorCal.
Absolutely.
We see that is problematic. Go ahead, Diya, were you gonna pop in?
No, please finish.
No, but yeah, I think about that, and I think about who the architects of tech is. I think HP designed a computer at one point that wasn't even able to recognize Black faces, and thinking about a security login. We can't even get to our own devices. And so it's really interesting who develops and who they use. But think about Snapchat. I don't have Snapchat, but the next wave does. They're using it. And the tools that I understand, the biometric test and through games and other videos that they're using, they're tracking that. They're building, they're doing AI and machine building to do that. And they're using Black bodies. They're using Black bodies for the prime users to elevate their platforms and build their data sets. And so we have to be careful of the information, our voice, our face, our hands that we're giving away freely to be managed. And so I think Diya elevates a really good point. It's the tech space that will become the next crime.
Go
I
ahead.
just want to jump
Spaces
on
like
something you were just
criminal
saying.
activity. Go ahead.
Because remember last year when the age app kind of went viral and everybody was
Yes.
aging themselves real
Mhm,
quick.
mhm, mhm.
And then there was this thing behind it where people were like, oh my God, don't do it. There's some Russian company or
Yes, yes,
whatever.
yes.
And people were trying to like douse that, when in actuality, those things are true. Like if I can develop an app that can acquire X amount of millions of faces in 2 months,
Come
there
on.
are government agencies that will write a check to me to
Yes.
be able to put those faces into a database,
Come on.
to be able, I saw somebody mention deep fakes earlier, but to be
Right.
able to not only put you somewhere you weren't because you have like a ring or a Nest at home that knows when you leave, and your home kit
Yes.
knows when you're
Yes.
not home. And so now we can put you somewhere else that you weren't. All those things, it sounds like conspiracy theory. And somebody said this last week. They said, when Black people talk about stuff that sounds like conspiracy theory, is because our whole life sounds like sci-fi.
Ooh.
And,
Our
Ooh.
whole history sounds like sci-fi. So it's easy to say, oh my God, you're getting caught up in conspiracy. Well, you wouldn't believe what it took to get me here right now from government action. So when I throw out the idea that using this little app could cause, further advance, an agency to be able to use facial recognition against Black people, believe me.
well,
So-
and Donte, I
so
know we have to wrap up.
Ring
Yes.
technology is directly connected with police departments and law enforcement departments around the country. Amazon Ring,
Right.
Amazon Ring surveillance system. So that's not even conspiracy theory. That is
Right.
reality.
That's real.
In my effort to talk about being critical of tech, what I mean is look at it with a critical gaze.
Sure.
It does not mean deny technology. That horse has left the stable a long time back.
Come on. Come on.
So we
That Tesla
will
left the
be
stable.
using, but what we can, when I say be critical, I mean hold them accountable, make yourselves be a part of that decision making. When you are part of the power structure that makes the decisions on what kinds of technologies to design, what kind of technologies to deploy, what kind of technologies to use, you're not denying technology, you're not being a Luddite, you're being critically aware
Right.
of harms of technology and holding technology companies accountable. There's a big difference between
Right.
the
And can I say a 30-minute commercial
last
right
thing
there?
we'll hear from, come on, Casey, close us out.
Yeah, I just want to say, first off, this has been a great conversation, but on the tech piece, we have to think about the power that Amazon and the data they're getting. Amazon, which also has Amazon Web Services, which we know hosts a number of websites, including Facebook, PBS, and other major corporations. They understand how people use data, what they're searching, why they're searching, also their purchasing power, and in what they're purchasing, tracking and monitoring what comes to people's homes, how people are using their capital, and just a number of things. Also, Amazon Web Service also hosts the our military system for the United States government.
Yes.
So
Yes.
they hold a lot of power and weight. So there is also a way when Diya says, that ship is sailed, it has, because there's no way to opt out. And when corporations try to opt out, there's a number of documentaries on PBS which talk about Amazon and their challenges of companies to kill big businesses. It used to be Walmart. Walmart used to be the enemy. Now it's Amazon, and they have data and capital. And so they're and I'm not like an anti-Amazon person, but I'm just letting you know, like, we have to be careful and who is going to who polices them, who will police the tech corporations, because they are the people that are going to take our basically our lives in a way, and recreate it to do whatever with no governance or oversight.
It's the most unregulated sector in the United States, the tech sector.
Yes. And so, in KC, last thing I'll say here, what you're talking about is a term called surveillance. It's the powerless. If you wanted to define people as powerless, I generally don't find people as powerless. I think we do have agency, the agency to resist, but it's basically the less powerful surveilling the powerful, right? And so we need people to surveil those who are surveilling us, and it's called surveillance. All right. And so Listen, everyone, this was great. I want to say first and foremost, thank you to the SBCC Foundation and thank you to the Center for Equity and Social Justice. And this would not have been possible without our panelists. First, I want to say thank you to Diya, Dr. Diya Basu. Please drop Diya. Please drop Diya in the chat. Please drop Diya in the chat.
It's been an absolute delight and a pleasure and an honor to be on this panel with so many wonderful people.
Thank you so much, Diya. Then I want to go to my brother, my debate partner for 4 years, okay? Vincent Powell, drop VP. Drop VP in the chat. Drop VP in the chat for bringing that knowledge. My man dropped podcasts. My man said 65% of roles go to Black people, only if they're criminals. Right, so appreciate you, Vincent Powell. Then I want to, and then listen, do not forget, today is KC's birthday. Just drop happy birthday, KC. Happy birthday, KC. Listen, thank you all so much. This was great, and I'm looking forward to the next one. Roxane, would you like to close us out?
Yep, just say thank you, and everybody, I hope that you will join us again. Like I said, we are working on closed captioning so we can make these webinars as accessible as possible for all of our community. As soon as those are available, I will send an email out and they will be available on the Center for Equity and Social Justice webpage. So you'll be hearing about that as soon as they come out.
Okay. Thank you to the
all
audience.
So much. Have a great evening. Happy birthday, Casey.
Happy birthday, Casey.
Birthday, Casey.
Bye, y'all. Peace.
Bye.